All right, we teased it on Twitter that we had landed a big guest for tonight's show. And for this podcast, and me specifically, this is perhaps the number one guest that I'd wanted to have on the show since our inception. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Around the NFL podcast and NFL media, it's the one and only Marc Sessler. Marc, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. I've listened to a few of your episodes, and I've enjoyed it, and it means a lot. Josh, you've gifted our group with some amazing artwork and T-shirts and artistry and beauty, and it's cool to be here. So thank you.
Absolutely, man. That was when we started this show. So we had like a spreadsheet where we planned everything out, and we wrote down like who's the dream guest, like who do we want to have on the show at some point. So to have you on the show, and I know we were talking a little bit before we got on mic here that we wanted our show to mirror yours, the Around the NFL podcast, in that it was entertaining, but also informative, and sometimes strayed a little bit into the entertaining territory because that's what keeps the fans coming back. And like you mentioned, that show has some of the best fans out there in terms of football podcasts or football shows in general.
Yeah, and I think, the four of us were talking a little bit before we got going here, and I look at our show and just say the four of us grew up on Gregg, Wes, Dan, and I grew up loving football and being obsessed with it. And it's just one part of life. And so our show is part football, part the other parts of life. And if it's not fun to do, we'd probably stop doing it at some point. But we've been through a lot of different phases of each other's lives. I would think Wes is probably the best person to point to on that front. I mean, he comes into LA, rolls into LA as a guy that is not comfortable being in California at all. And I hanging out with him a bunch early on, battled it. And I have some interesting memories of him, but then the transformation, and he went through such a battle with cancer. He meets the lady of his dreams, Lakeisha, an absolutely gem of a person, just the most positive person I've ever met. They get married out of all this. They're having a child soon. I mean, he's kind of what I think as sort of the centerpiece when you talk about life events of what kind of keeps us together. And as a group, we're friends. And if that all stopped at some point, or not stopped our friendships, but if the whole experience changed a little, I think we would want to keep it as pure and good as possible. And it's been a ride, and football, again, is just like a little tiny, it's a part of it. It's not the whole thing.
Yeah, I would say football is what gets people in the door with your podcast, and then the camaraderie, the chemistry, the friendship that you have with the other guys on the show is what keeps them listening episode after episode. And that's something that we actually benefited from. Was you see a lot of these shows and the chemistry is forced because the people just don't really know each other. They're doing it over, StreamYard or Zoom, and it's just hard. We've all been friends now for going on, a decade plus. And so when you have that kind of camaraderie and chemistry with each other, it doesn't feel forced. It feels authentic. And you do get to have these kind of life experiences with people. That's one thing I've really enjoyed, is not just all the football analysis, but kind of like you said, watching the show evolve, but then watching the four of you kind of living vicariously through you all as you kind of had this meteoric rise there at NFL Media with the show. And then, like you said, the life events. I mean, Chris getting engaged and married and cancer, and now with a baby due at the end of the month. I mean, it's just been a wild ride.
Yeah. And it's I can see it in other shows too. And I think it's sort of the secret sauce. You can't fake it if it's there. And I grew up a Star Wars fan, and I always remember being young thinking I want to meet my Ben Kenobi figure, or when you've been in projects where you're teaming with people that kind of wanted to help you and guide you. And I had been at NFL before the show started, but I don't know where I'd be without the other three guys. I don't think I'd be there. I'm not sure where I'd be, maybe, but it would be very different. And it's you just feel kind of lucky that the four of us, and I would include Erica as it's the five of us at this point. It's not the four, right? And we've had a lot of producers too, some great ones along the way, but she has cemented herself as at this very critical juncture in time in our show, I think, as the producer of producers. And I just feel kind of lucky to be able to think about who I was in 7th or 8th grade and how obsessed I was sitting up at 3 a.m. thinking about the NFL and wondering back then when there was no way to get into the media. I mean, there was like 12 people talking about football on TV back then, and thinking that would always be that way, that we have a chance, and you guys too. It's like anyone can start their own show and share their passion for this. And it's about the sport, and it's about much more. And it's really important who you team with. And I mean, I just feel like we got lucky with our group. And but we're also, like you, we're passionate, and we're not going to mail it in. We care a lot, and you have to kind of be self-starters. Like the NFL has been really cool kind of allowing us to do the show, because there's times I think we've gone a little bit against the grain of what you would think when you think of NFL.com or NFL Network. But they've ridden with us through some rougher moments, maybe. I don't know how else to put it, but they've been cool. And like in return, I think we've been industrious. I don't know how else to put it. Industrious and passionate.
Yeah, that was one thing, Bobby. I know that when we started this show, we were amazed at the kind of reception. But Mark's right. You can't just mail it in when it comes to putting out content. Like if you're good, people will love you, but they'll also ditch you pretty fast if you start mailing it in.
Absolutely. And even I think probably one of the best things for us was starting out just talking about something we knew. So we started talking fantasy football. We all knew each other. We had great chemistry together. And it's just kind of weird. Markham came on, and we were just literally doing a podcast for 12 dudes in a fantasy football league. And, every once in a while, me and Josh would look at the analytics, and we would be like, who is listening to this thing? Why are there 50 listens on this?
Yeah, it had 50 listens. A lot of people from like Sweden, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was strange because we kind of followed the fantasy footballers trajectory, where we did start with a podcast for our league, and then it grew out of that. But Bobby's right. Like we were industrious even when it was just the 12 guys in our league, ourselves included, that we were making the pod for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead, Addy.
We've had a lot of luck too with fans and reception so far. Everyone's been super cool with us. They've been quick to interact with us, message us, ask for help. It's been really weird because we haven't even been doing it for a year yet. And also, like, I have no idea why are you on our show?
Well,
it's a fair question.
Well,
I feel like it's too soon. I'm worried that we're not going to be humble after this.
It's like, well, I think it's our shared love of Sweden is probably that's one thing that ties us together. But I will say this, like, there are the type of people that they go to college, they go to journalism school, and they ride sort of a beeline right into their career. And I didn't even come to NFL until I was 36 and months away from having our first child born, and taking a huge pay cut to work there 3 days a week. And just sort of, if it weren't for my wife, Simone, like if it were a different type of wife or person, she would have said, no, we're not going to take a huge pay cut. That doesn't make any sense. She was, it's the people you have around you. I was lucky to live in LA and jogging by NFL Network every day, and met a friend who knew an editor there and said, and I hadn't written a piece of journalism in 15 years. So I went in and I'd go take lunch breaks thinking, I'm going to get fired. I have no idea how to write these stories, and like having multiple, internal panic attacks. And then it just reps. You just like, if you can hang around long enough, and if you care enough, it comes out, and suddenly you're suddenly cemented to some degree. Went through a lot of iterations there. Was lucky, very lucky, basically, that Dan showed up a month later, and he and I became friends. And Gregg showed up a couple years later and became my boss. And wondering if you're going to hang around, if Gregg thinks you're worth it. And Gregg was very generous to give us a shot too. And then he brought Wes in. It's kind of like when you go through the history of it, it's just a lot of life events that could have gone in a totally different way. So I before I went to NFL, I had a blog with friends that I grew up with writing about football. And it was like, we're not getting paid for this, but we know each other's sensibilities. This is something we love doing together. And I remember, like, I'd write a post and I'd have like 15 people that read it. And it was like the most important 15 people in my life because like I spent 2 hours writing this thing and they looked at it. So it's like the size of the audience doesn't matter when you're rolling into this whole situation, and it can grow and all that stuff. But like, if that's the main driver, those people I think get flushed out. You just have to be like, I'm going to write, I'm going to talk about football. I'm going to be with my friends no matter what. I don't care if there's 12 people or 1,200.
Yeah. In fact, I put out a tweet today and it got like 20 retweets and 23 likes, and it was like the most exciting thing in the past 2 months. You know?
It was.
I hear you.
He was messaging us about it. Like, did y'all see that?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's funny, Mark, you mentioned going to college, journalism school, rolling right into it. That was actually my path. So I went to college, went to journalism school, but did not want to go into journalism. I realized about like March of my senior year, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to work in journalism. Ended up getting a job working for a newspaper here in our state capital as a sports writer, making $22,000 a year. So nothing, just
big
dirt
coin
money.
Right there. Big coin.
Yeah. Good coin for a guy who'd never had a job up to that point. But I said it was the most fun first job you can ever have because I was getting paid to watch sports. And I think the fact that we all four of us do podcasts about the NFL kind of speaks to that same desire to just have fun talking about something that we're passionate about. This is an outpouring of love. Like you said, when you're first starting out, kind of grinding the point that we're at right now, where we're working, doing this 40 weeks in a row to build our audience, we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it because it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, I could think of myself that I moved to LA in 2004 to go to UCLA to do screenwriting. That's why I moved here. And then, that's a big ask. And I didn't have the money to kind of sustain myself to get through that. Some people don't get a screenplay done until they're 50. And I didn't really have a plan, or I didn't know what I was doing. I moved here and didn't know anyone. And the NFL thing came up a few years later, and it came at the right time because I came close to almost leaving LA. I just didn't know what my purpose was because I took a bunch of corporate jobs that were writing based, but it was like writing like 100-page, totally boring robotic proposals for assholes. Sorry, they were just like rich men that were really concerned about their own money, and it's like why? And they had no respect for what I was doing for them at all. Like the beeline was like, I want to create, I want to write. And when it got married with football, it was like, wow, that is something I would love to do. I think that there's different ways to get into it. Like I would be happy to write about gardening if there was really freedom to do it. Football is a perfect partner along with all those passions. And again, it matters who you team up with. And if you lose the passion, you move on, but like for now, football really works. And I can really see also when I can see it in you guys, like as a group of guy friends, not to say it couldn't happen with a group of girls the same way. I'm sure it could. It'd be great. But like a group of guy friends, like talking about football, like kind of when you've been through a lot of real life stuff together, but it's something that kind of is a connective tissue, some DNA between you. It's a great way to debate and use, get your personalities out there and your individual interests and fandom. It's a perfect thing to do a show about or to write about or to you get away from the rest of your life. So, there's really no difference between, it doesn't matter the platform. It's all sort of the same.
Yeah, I know Adam loves this time too. We all get away from our wives for a little bit and our children. Right. Adam comes into the shed with a beer and a Monster and simultaneously pounds both. So his heart is like, yeah, whatever happens, Jesus take the wheel.
Adam gets it. Yeah,
he does.
Sure.
He understands. Bobby comes rolling in with his suit
gets it.
And Todd Gurley jersey going on, which is a great combo, Bobby. Mark, I'm surprised that we haven't seen this combo on the NFL Network yet with the suit and tie and then the jersey just over top of it.
Well, I need to think about, how we're approaching those opportunities from a fashion angle. They have some rules that, they like to see people probably dressed up a certain way. And I think that our show is specifically, when we've been lucky to be on the network and we're wearing t-shirts or button down shirts, like ripped off a t-shirt. Like it's probably not the first thing they were dreaming up, but, you do it and then you ask for forgiveness later. Or now.
Yeah,
now,
right.
if they're seeing this now, I'll be.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, NFL Network. My bad.
I think the saddest thing about my outfit is that I bought it within the last month, and the jersey's already vintage because now TG's gone, and the Rams have come out with new unis since then. So
it's rough.
yeah,
Well, it's more valuable now. It's vintage. It's suddenly, and it looks sharp, and like the colors look extravagant next to one another.
Great.
So.
Oh yeah.
Do you like the new jerseys? Do you like them?
I was gonna say, Mark, were you a fan?
The new Rams ones?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it was kind of hot take central with hating on them by some. Others were kind. I'm fine with them. I'm not a huge fan of fade color, color into white in general.
Yeah.
The gradient stuff, right? That's the right word. But I don't dislike them, and I think they're sharp. And to me, some of the stuff that's come out have been much more offensive. I'm not a huge fan of the Falcons jerseys. I don't know what's going on with that situation, but I think most people feel that way. The Rams, I think people were pretty divided on, and I've been tough on the Rams in general. Living in LA with some of we're very tied to the Rams at NFL Network. I get that, but I like the jersey. I like the uniforms. I'm not sitting up at night thinking about them, endlessly, but they're nice.
They don't make me angry.
No, they are. And I would say if you pair them with the Chargers, LA has done a good job overall. I mean, the Chargers uniforms are they're sweet. I think most agree they're beautiful.
They look kind of similar though, the two of them together.
Mm-hmm. They really do.
All blue ones.
That's probably the bigger knock, is that I think that there are some Rams fans coming out a little confused by the redesign on some level, that they're extremely Chargers-esque. I don't know what focus groups they put these through, but that didn't come up as a point of contention is confusing.
Yeah,
right.
that especially with the new logo, which I compared to like Donald Trump's hair, like swooping over the LA.
That's pretty apt. Yeah.
It just didn't. It looked like it kind of looked like a lightning bolt. So I was like, is this the Rams or the Chargers? Yeah, that wasn't great. I will say, Adam was asking me like, what's the deal with like the white into yellow numbers? And I was like, I guess it's like sort of like an LA thing, like kind of like the sunset over the white beaches is kind of the look they were going for. But I agree. It is kind of a weird thing to put on like a football jersey, like the most masculine of all the sports. And we're going to go with gradient for the numbers. I mean, it's just kind of bizarre that that's the choice they would go with.
You're so romantic, Josh.
I know, right? I thought so too.
Huge gradient takes, and I like it. I feel the same way as you. And like, I mean, it's probably tough on the organization if they come out and people are down on them on some level, but I think they survived the rollout for the most part.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, when people think about the big three IDP podcasts, Mark, they think about fast food takes, football, and then gradients on football jerseys.
Yeah, that's got to be the top three. And I mean, it's, 3 is trying to get up there into 2 or 1. So we understand.
So Mark, let's get into a little bit more about the podcast for those who maybe aren't familiar with your work or the podcast. We've mentioned, that you have the Around the NFL podcast. You work for NFL Media. So what year did the pod start? I was trying to think about this earlier.
Wow, I've tried to think about this too, and we've actually debated it, but I think it was 2013. But Gregg was even with the company before that, but he was on the East Coast, and Dan and I were here in LA, and we were writing, and Dan and I had what I would call a mini pod that Dave Damashek, who was a wonderful guy, was nice enough, really just couldn't have been more charitable to 2 guys with no experience. He put our little 10 or 12 minute show called The Debate Club on the end of his podcast, which was getting a huge amount of listeners and still does. I'm not sure we'd even be here if that wasn't happening. So I always think about Dave Damashek, number one. And then Gregg came to LA soon after. And I think we had Gregg on the Debate Club a few times remotely, from New York, and he'd call in to give his thoughts on our abilities at doing that and other topics. But then Wes joined the company soon after, and it was pitched by our bosses, if I'm not mistaken at the time, that we would do the show in pairs of 2 or maybe 2 or 3 tops, while someone else would be downstairs, with a horsewhip on them writing the articles. Like, you can't have all 4 of these guys disappear at the same time. And we eventually kind of just pushed and kind of won that battle. So it started then, and we didn't know this, but one of the listeners said that we had hit 1,000 episodes a couple weeks ago. And so it's been that many, really because we've always tried to do 3 shows a week during the regular season and during much of the off season. But when you get into that late May, June period, during a normal off season, we would go to 2, but that's more than some football podcasts. And it got us to 1,000, which apparently is a landmark that none of us were aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. That's insane. We've done 44 and when we're ready for a vacation.
Yeah, that feels like work, right?
Yeah. Josh, he runs a tight ship for sure.
Well, yeah, he seems to have been talking to Gregg or Dan to some degree here.
Yeah. Josh is definitely the glue that holds me and Adam together. Me and Adam definitely are the ones that chase rabbits in these situations, and we get off on tangents about players or just fast food or random thoughts that come through our minds. But Josh is always the one that kind of reels us back. But one thing that Josh has really been pushing to me within the last really 6 months. He's like, man, I'm telling you, you really need to listen to this Around the NFL podcast. He's like, it's not fantasy football, but it's great. And I really have, the last month or so, really, I've plugged into it, especially since we've had some more time. But your all's podcast is great for fantasy footballers from the perspective of, fantasy football guys are always concerned about, stats and always concerned about LB1s and who's the safety one and who's, your top RB off the board and everything. But people in fantasy football don't always, pay attention to offensive and defensive coordinators that are, moving teams or, things that are moving hands within organizations that might affect the way that those players play in a given scheme or whatever. So, your all's podcast is super helpful to listen to just because it gives you a different perspective, I guess, on fantasy football.
Well, I think probably the same that you guys experienced, that with 4 of us, you're going to get 4 different people and we're going to be interested in 4 different look-ins or aspects of football. And, I think Gregg is one of the best sports writers and football analysts out there. And if he taught me anything, he was my boss for a while. And I'll say this, he was pretty good about being like, you got to get better at headlines. You got to get to the point quicker. You got to have a real take. And I was really still learning to write football stuff in general. And he's pretty direct and you need that sometimes. He really kind of made me think about what I was doing when I'd write. And I think a lot about what Gregg said to me. And Gregg loves football more than any person I've ever met in my life, unabashedly. And it's incredible to be around someone with that kind of passion for football. When I think about Wes, I remember, being intimidated when when Wes first came, because he just seemed so confident in his football takes. And I'm a little more out there with other stuff that I'm into. And I don't walk around the newsroom telling everyone I know who the best quarterback is or that, because I think I'm learning all the time. And these guys are too, but Wes is right about his takes often and had confidence. And I think he had been in fantasy football writing, both of them, for a long time, where they had come in with that power where you write something, you believe it. And I've just learned so much. And I remember wanting, just in general, to sit down and watch football with Wes, because he has a great naked eye for the game. When you're watching a running back, he'll be like, he's slower than he's been in the past. I'm like, whoa, I'm learning from that. I see that, and you're right, but I wouldn't have announced that to the room. And Dan is sort of the incredible, spicy, hilarious maestro of it all. And Dan loves football and knows his football too. And I would like to think that I know my football too as well, but I wouldn't walk around pronouncing that to people. I just feel probably our show has different elements and different people. And so if a fantasy football person is listening to our show, you're going to get a lot of stuff maybe you didn't need. But you are going to get some stuff, especially from the tape watching that we all try to do during the season, where you might think about why you're starting this player this week versus player B, based especially on what I would say Gregg and Wes have to say about some of these guys.
Yeah, exactly what you're talking about too, Mark. We're a little bit the same, all three of us, in that we all love fantasy football, but we're all different in that, Josh is he's the headline guy. I mean, and he's an editor. That's his job. He stays on me and Markham religiously to try to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing. So, I mean, literally, he's the glue to the situation. He is the worst. But Adam legitimately has the best eye of us. I mean, he can literally tell, so and so looks great this year. He's really, whatever type of situation we're looking at. But then I feel like my comp is probably, I've bought and sold a lot of cars and houses and stuff over my life. And so mine is kind of the ploy of buy, sell, hold, so this is the people that you really want to be targeting. This is the people that you really want to be getting rid of. So yeah, kind of the same dynamic, two completely different shows, but the glue that kind of holds us all together is very similar.
And we all push each other. It's the iron sharpens iron, saying. It's that's us. That's definitely us.
That's definitely us, Mark. If you can't tell.
No, I can tell. I mean, but I think it's really cool to have you don't want 3 or 4 of the same exact skill sets, and it doesn't create good conversation because I think some of our biggest debates probably come from life perspective and what kind of your value system inside it, not that anyone is a villain or something, but just what you see and what you react to. It's good to have different takes and different point of views. And, I can see that with you guys for sure.
Yeah. So Mark, let's talk a little football here. Because I think we could sit here and talk just about the pod, and congratulations on 1,000 episodes, by the way. I was having a little technical difficulties when you were talking about that, but that is a huge milestone. And I'm sure when you guys started out in the debate club days that was far from your mind. So a huge congrats.
Well, I think it was probably far from NFL media's minds too. So
probably
a slight coup d'etat on that front.
Absolutely. So one thing that you guys talked about on the show last Friday, Mark, and everyone needs to check out as well. You guys have the podcast. You recently have gotten back on NFL Network, doing the around the NFL broadcast on Fridays. So check that out. But one thing that you all talked about that was the big news item last week was the schedule release. This is kind of the last big sort of news event for the NFL for a little while here, especially in this coronavirus time. We don't know what the offseason is going to look like. So this was kind of the last big marquee thing on the calendar. We've had a little bit of time to digest this now. It was released a week ago today. So looking at the calendar, Mark, what are some games? They can be Browns games. We know you're a Browns fan. We're going to get into that. But what are some games that you're looking forward to here in 2020?
Well, when I think about that, because you're right, it's a big moment for NFL media to roll that out and own it. But I think most people that look at the schedule feel like if you look too far down the schedule, you're not really sure what that's going to look like. That's a different country from today. So I kind of look at the early part of week 1, and I think Bucs Saints out of the gate is, but how are you not most fascinated with the idea of Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski on the Bucs and Bruce Arians and how that will all go? And the Saints are fascinating in their own right. I mean, that doesn't need to be explained too much more. I think about Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. I just want to, the Bengals to me have been one constant thing, no matter the record for so long. They're very different to me now. They're, as a Browns fan, they're right in the AFC North. It's one of the bigger disasters to come out of last season was the Bengals getting the first overall pick and getting Joe Burrow. I mean, I didn't need that. That's not what I was hoping would happen out of that. And if he's what people think he'll be, that is quite problematic. The last thing I'd kind of think about is, on the flip side, is the Patriots. Just what will they be? And they've given them a ton of primetime games, and but it just I remember the Patriots pre-Tom Brady and pre-Belichick, or even the Belichick year when he got there, and I think they went 6-10 and were sort of a disaster. And even the year they won the Super Bowl opened up 1 or 3 or something. And I thought Belichick might be failing here and he might be done. And as a previous Browns coach, Belichick was quite a fascination to me. But here we are again on the other flip side of that, 2 decades later, 2 decades after 9/11, the year all that went down, and the year after when they won the Super Bowl. So a Patriots team minus Tom Brady is, for me, must watch. And I don't care if they're good or not. I have to see what that looks like. That is a totally engaging, fresh experience from the visual perspective. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, Addy, you've been hyping the Tampa Brady Buccaneers up all offseason as probably the most fascinating team going into 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how teams are going to stop that offense. They're just so good at pretty much every level. I'm a big fan of Keyshawn Vaughn, who they brought in. I thought they got a steal in the draft, getting that tackle to shore up that line. I like the defense. It's young and upcoming. I think they're going to be hard to deal with this year.
I'm with you.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun, especially going up against Drew Brees and the Saints. Mark, y'all were talking about how, I think it was Gregg that brought it up, this is a team that seems to be in like a Super Bowl now or bust type of mentality for like the last 3 years. But something feels a little different this year with Brees signing the TV deal, Sean Payton pretty much coming out and saying this is Brees' last year. This does feel like the final hurrah for the Drew Brees-led Saints.
Yeah, I think it is. I just, I look at Philip Rivers the same way in Indianapolis. You don't announce to the national media that you're going to be a high school coach the minute you quit if you're going to stay in Indianapolis for 4 years. I mean, we're talking about high school kids. You don't tell them that. And Drew Brees has already, charted out what comes next. And it kind of makes sense. The Saints are sort of in this 1 year window after 3 utterly ghastly, horrifying playoff losses to erase all that and do it. And if it doesn't happen this year, I think you move in a different direction to some degree. I think it's a bit of an upset that Sean Payton is still there after 3 years ago, I would have thought that Sean Payton might be the Cowboys coach by now, but they figured that out. And he is still, to me, a top 2 or 3 coach in the league. And they have as good a chance as anyone, but we've seen how hard it is to get back to these spots. And suddenly you have this Tampa Bay team, to your comments, that looks legit. And that's not what they were planning for.
No. And it is an interesting question to think about. What do the Saints look like post-Brees? I know there's a certain quarterback on that roster that you'd like to see take the reins when Brees is done, Mark.
Well, when it comes to Taysom Hill, I think he's, and the playoffs feel like 2,000 years ago based on what we're dealing with as a country, or as a world. But Taysom Hill was just fascinating in that playoff loss, and I'd love to see him get a chance as a starter, much more than I need them to plug Jameis Winston in for a game or two if Brees goes down. I just think you want to see what you have there. And I think Sean Payton's talked him up. We've all seen those comments to the nth degree, comparing him to Steve Young. So if that's the case, I'm okay with the late career start to that part of his journey, Taysom Hill, but let's see it. And I don't think you need to wait 2 more years. And I don't think that they sign him to an extension to have him be a gadget player that, operates on special teams and 12 snaps a week on offense.
I think one thing that I'm super interested in this year as well is, if you think about it, this is going to be the last year of the old quarterback versus the new world quarterback. You've got your Big Ben, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, old man Rivers up there in Indy. But then you've got your young guns in Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray. So this is truly going to be the last year for some of these older vets. And, I hope, we can work the 2020 season out. But I hope also that as many of the old guys can make the playoffs as possible, just to make that 2020 playoff more, interesting.
I love that thought. And I'm with you. I feel like it kind of reminds me, and I can't place it exactly at the moment in the trilogy, but I believe at the end of the first Lord of the Rings or somewhere around there, where they talk about the age of man, shifting over and changing, that we are looking at guys that we've been watching on Sunday for 15, 18, 20 years. It is the end for most of them. And we have no idea if Philip Rivers is going to work out in Indianapolis. I give him a good chance. or if Tom Brady is going to be the same guy. I mean, I point back to that 2010 Brett Favre year where he just fell off a cliff. I mean, like a car just shot off a cliff, and it was like hard to watch. And like, if that's the case, there's no way you bring that kind of a player back again. So we don't know. Quarterbacks, when quarterbacks go dark, they go dark in a hurry, and it's tough on the eyes.
It is. They fall off pretty quickly. Go ahead, Addy.
Speaking of the age thing, that week 1 matchup between Tampa Bay and the Saints, those two starting quarterbacks are combined 84 years old. That's got to be some type of
That's
record.
crazy.
Right?
It makes us feel good, though. It makes us feel young.
Yeah, maybe we'd have to ask Chris Wessling. Maybe Sammy Baugh was 50 years old playing another 40-year-old, and they got to 90.
I mean, if he battled Y.A. Tittle at some point, I don't know what. I don't even know who to pair at that point.
I know, right? So, Addy, give us a game that you're looking forward to this season.
Well, it was actually that Tampa Bay New Orleans game. So,
well, it makes sense, right? We're all into it. So.
It's very exciting all the way around.
Okay, I can do one off the cuff here. I'm excited to see the Cowboys bringing CeeDee Lamb in. Giving Dak all these toys. I think the defense is pretty solid. It's probably one of the more underrated units in the league. But man, that offense, I mean, that's up there with one of the best offenses in the league now. So, I'm excited to see them this year.
Love that. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on Mike McCarthy to not go 8-8. I don't think that's acceptable.
Yeah, was he actually down in that bunker watching as much film and recreating himself as much as we've been told by his PR team?
We'll see. Well, that came from a lot of that came from right in house at NFL, and I think that's possible. I mean, I actually did do this one article a while back about and it was based around Mike Pettin and others who, when they took a year off, it really did. Number one, it helped their health. Like they all tested nonstop. They're under NFL benefits, and all their blood pressure and everything that affects a guy of a certain age got way better. But the perspective of a year away to get out of your little world to look at other teams and offenses or defenses, and I do think that's possible with Mike McCarthy. I mean, I just want to see it. He's dealing with a loaded offense. To your guys' point, so that'll happen.
No more excuses. Bobby, give us a game you're looking forward to.
Yeah, so, if we can make through the season to get to week 10, I'm super excited about the Bills. I believe it's at home against the Cardinals. It could be the opposite, but, super excited to see two young quarterbacks, two up-and-coming teams. The Bills looked awesome last year. Now with the addition of Stefon Diggs, you've got Kyler Murray with maybe the most dangerous, receiving weapon in Nuke to go with him this year. So excited to see what they look like. Excited to see what Isaiah Simmons looks like another couple years with Tremaine Edmonds, our boy Budda Baker. I love Jordan Poyer. So just really a star-studded, lineup on both sides of the ball. But if we can get to week 10, I don't really care what game we're watching, but that one would be a fine one.
Just get us to week 10, Lord. That's all we ask.
That's a good point. I think also like Brian Daboll, the Bills play caller, offensive coordinator, one of the more underrated trick masters out there. I mean, he's done a lot with that Bills offense that I don't think would have happened with other guys.
Yeah, I think Diggs, we talked about this a couple episodes ago, but I think Diggs could have an awesome year. People forget that A, Josh Allen has a cannon, and B, Stefon Diggs is a really, really good route runner. So even though Allen's not super accurate, you don't have to be really, really accurate when Diggs is, 2 steps past the CB on a lot of those plays. But, also interested to see what Zach Moss looks like in that offense, to see what him and Singletary's splits are going to be. So, yeah, man, the Bills are kind of fun. But, yeah, that's my new team, the Arizona Cardinals. I'm a Rams fan for a long time, but when they drafted my boy Isaiah Simmons, I've jumped ship.
Oh, you jumped ship right into the into enemy waters there. That's impressive.
It was the jersey change. That's what did it.
Yeah.
He was like, gradient numbers. No, I cannot support this.
I hear you.
Not loyal. Not loyal. Buddy.
Definitely not. Yeah, the Bills are a fascinating team this year, Mark. It seems like with Tom Brady leaving the AFC East finally, that the Bills are dealing with something that I think you all brought this up, that they're not quite used to, which is expectation specifically expectation to win that division this year. So I am very fascinated to see how this Bills team, which has kind of been the scrappy underdog for a couple years, deals with now having the target on their back.
Yeah, I love Sean McDermott. I think he's a great coach, and
I agree.
Brandon Beane, the GM, and they're one of the few teams where the coach and GM seem to be totally in lockstep. And I look at the Bills team that McDermott pulled into the playoffs a couple of years ago when Tyrod Taylor was the quarterback, and that didn't end well. But it was like, wow, that was a pretty great coaching job with not a lot of talent, and they were really deficient on offense up until last offseason when they added a couple guys, and now they look pretty good. But they were in the middle of a rebuild, and he got them to January. I just believe in the coach, and I think that a good coach, it's kind of like when you write a great script, like really only terrible actors can mess it up. And so McDermott's sort of that guy for me that in having met him once, like I'm easily impressed by these guys. So it's not a great thing, but I thought he was a cool dude too, and like just seemed to have this kind of quiet, non-alpha male, but just sort of quiet confidence to him. And I think even if you look at Carolina, the way he coached up Carolina defenses when they were trying to like cost cut and get rid of big name players, he still found a way to coach up secondaries with guys that you wouldn't know who they were. And I think he's brought that trade to Buffalo.
This is so funny, the dynamic here, because a lot of times too on our show, Mark, when we bring up a team, Josh is so quick to go to, Sean McDermott, or no, Chris Ballard. He goes to the OC or the GM or whoever that time. You bring up the Bills, and me and Adam are automatically talking about, now let me tell you about Tremaine Edmonds. He's going to be really good this year. But
right,
it's funny the dynamic to see like where your personality goes when you bring up like.
I just like the one, and we have we have the benefit of going to the combine and owners meetings where you have a chance to kind of talk to these guys either in interview sessions. I will say at the Super Bowl week, which is an absolute nightmare on some levels in terms of trying to get access to anyone. But if you go to team availabilities and you can get a chance to talk to coaches. And I remember going to the Seahawks Broncos Super Bowl where we got Chris Wessling and I especially talked to Dan Quinn before he became a head coach. He was the DC for the Seahawks. Just loving him, and like you'd ask him a question and he was honest and real and would give you like a 5 or 6 minute in-depth answer about what they really wanted to do in the game. And I just kind of have fallen for coaches and assistant coaches more than players, because I think players, it's not their fault, but they're kind of trained to not say anything unless you get that subset that they want to make headlines or they just can't help it. But coaches come with this whole different worldview, and I just learn from them. And I think if anything, I'd rather be a coach than a player. And so maybe it's just where you feel fascinated. I don't know how to answer it other than that.
Yeah, I think some of those players, the media handlers probably get the hooks in pretty early. The coaches tend to be. Trend's been a little bit reversed with guys like Cliff Kingsbury and Matt the Flower LaFleur, as you like to call him, Mark, coming in at like
that's
RA.
how you translate that last name.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. But most coaches are a little older. They've been around the league a while. They're lifers, most of these guys. So I feel like that's what you see sometimes with these coaches is they've been around long enough. They're kind of like the grandma that's in the corner of the room at Thanksgiving, just saying whatever comes to mind. That's kind of how I see the coaches is like, look, I've been doing this 20 years. Like I can afford to be a little more loose with my opinions than I was when I was 28.
Yeah. And they're putting up with, a room of personalities that we would, if you're a school teacher or something, you're not dealing with this on a daily basis.
Yeah. I think everyone's goal is eventually be like Bruce Arians, where you don't give a shit about anything.
Well, and he's not afraid to be honest because he's been through this a billion times. And I think in 2020, any honesty you can get from anyone in sports in terms of quotes and comments and reaction is appreciated.
For sure.
Yeah, so I'll wrap us up here on the schedule release. Here in Kentucky, it's weird, Mark, because not having any professional franchises at all for any of the major sports leagues, For the NFL, you see fandom split between the Titans, the Bengals, and the Colts for the most part, with like a smattering of Cowboys and Packers fans and kind of the big name teams. So the Colts, I'm a Colts fan, so having the Bengals in Cincinnati, 4 or 5 hours north of us, we always wanted to have like this kind of Colts Bengals kind of in-state rivalry we're not even in the state where the teams are. And the Bengals, like you said, I think you've described them before, maybe this was another team, as like just a raging yawn for the majority of the Andy Dalton-led Bengals experience. They just weren't that fun to watch, so you never really got hyped up for the games. I've said it on Twitter, I'm getting some like rookie season Andrew Luck vibes from Joe Burrow already. So I think this Bengals team is going to be infinitely more fun than they've been in the past. So I'm really looking forward to that October 18th game where the Bengals visit Indy, just because, you've got this grand experiment with old man Rivers there in Indy behind this offensive line with all these weapons versus the franchise savior and Joe Burrow. That's some juicy football drama.
Yeah, I it's hard for me to get too excited about the Bengals as a Browns supporter, but I see a total identity shift if this goes right with Joe Burrow, and I just never signed up for the Andy Dalton thing. It's not against him. I think he's a good quarterback who's got a clear ceiling and did really pretty workmanlike and did everything they could have asked of him. But Joe Burrow just seems to be next level exciting, and if he is what we expect, it's been a really long time. And some of my best football memories growing up were when the Browns and Bengals were a real rivalry. So you can point to Colts Bengals, and that's true too. But the Bengals having a rivalry with anyone would be nice breaking
change.
News, right? Yeah. So it's like I put them up there on the schedule release excitement level too, just to see what they look like, because he's not walking into the worst situation. We all know that. Like anyone who's into fantasy could look at their offense and say, you're getting AJ Green back. You're getting, Joe Mixon, I think, is a fantastic running back. Their O-line is a little questionable, but better than it's been in the past. And it comes down to me, the coaching staff. Who are they? I have no concept of what they represent or who they are. We didn't get any sense of that last year. Are you a difference maker, or does the coaching staff need to be evaluated and make sure you have the right one in there for Joe Burrow? So I think it's a huge year for those coaches, assuming that games are played.
Yeah, exactly. That's the big caveat with all this, right? The schedule release is great. Things might look a little different come August if the world still looks like it does right now. So I will say, though, last kind of Burrow note, when I saw him smoking the cigar after they had won the national championship, I was like, oh, this dude, I'm not worried about this dude. He's going to walk in and just have the respect of that locker room like day one.
Well, that, as a Browns fan, that was the first, that put a scare into me. I thought, I don't need this guy in the AFC North. And then suddenly there he is. And I'm not sure who the most wanting quarterback in that division is right now. I mean, it's up for debate. It's not Lamar Jackson. I hope it's not Baker Mayfield. I don't like where we are at this point at all.
Hey, you've got 300-pound Big Ben Roethlisberger, so he's extra large Roethlisberger this year.
Slightly like a wild card at this stage.
So, Mark, you've mentioned the Browns. Anyone who listens to the podcast or follows your work on NFL.com knows you're a diehard Browns fan. We don't have to rehash 2019. That was kind of the season of hope for Browns fans. Didn't quite turn out the way that fans had hoped for, but you all have a new coach, a new GM, and a new outlook. You had a very nice draft by all accounts. Take us through what your thoughts have been on the Browns offseason and what your outlook is for the team in 2020.
Well, I think it's a better offseason than last year. And I get why it doesn't generate headlines because of the exhaustion factor. And I feel exhausted with what happened last year, but they patched up their line. We know what they've done there. And for me, it was more like, as a Browns fan, and it's really not that different than the Bengals on some level, that they've been through 4 billion iterations of head coach and GM, not being paired together, but being hired at like slightly different times, where there were just endless soap operas and infighting and dramas where they were trying to one up each other, but neither seemed to have any skills at what they were doing to start with. So, it was just like 20 years of really a dark 2-decade stretch where I'm not sure how much lower it could get. You go 0-16. What more do we need to do to signify that we don't have the eye on the ball here? But I look at Stefanski and Andrew Berry, the youngest GM in the league, who came in late in the offseason to deal with a draft where you've got scouts looking at players probably for the previous regime. I thought he nailed the draft. He nailed free agency, very aggressive. Stefanski, very detail-oriented from what we're hearing from the players, which was missing under Freddie Kitchens, who otherwise I'd love to hang out with. But, I think there were a lot of issues from players in terms of like you get through a drive or two in the game and there's no game plan. And it was about $1 billion as far as the East is from the West in terms of, a Belichick halftime adjustment scenario. I think it's just a more organized front office coaching staff married scenario. And I have a lot of hope on that front. The roster looks really good. And if they aren't 10-6, I'm not quite sure what happened unless there aren't 16 games. I mean, they should be. It's a terrible situation for a first-year coach, but they seem to. There are reports the players saying we love Stefanski. He's given us very clear objectives and goals to attain. And for me, that's all I want to hear. What is the game plan? Is there one? And there didn't seem to be one last year. There does this time around.
Yeah, Addy, I know that being a Vikings fan, Kevin Stefanski, a guy you're very familiar with. Another guy that you're familiar with and love very much, like a son, is Odell Beckham, as you call him, and the Drip King himself. And I know that's one thing that you are very excited about, the fact that the Browns did not do something stupid or rash and trade OBJ during the offseason. I know as an Odell Beckham owner in fantasy, you've got to be excited for what his outlook is this year.
Oh yeah, and all the videos around this time of year that the players release of them working out and stuff. He looks bigger. He's definitely been lifting weights. He's gotten bigger, but he's been saying that this is going to be his best year yet, and I believe him.
Yeah, and they didn't trade him like that. Like they didn't trade Olivier Vernon. They didn't trade him. They didn't trade fill in the blank. And the result in David Njoku. And like they kind of kept them all. And it's like, we're not going to burn down what the previous regime did well. We're going to keep these guys. And I'm with you. I mean, Odell Beckham was never healthy last year. So why not find out what you have here?
Yeah, and you got to love the Austin Hooper, acquisition too, because Stefanski really good at 2 tight end sets. That's kind of the way the league is moving. So even if they get rid of Njoku, I think Harrison Bryant is going to be someone.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge college guy. Like, I mean, our group jumps in kind of when they're adopted by teams, but the more I look at Harrison Bryant, it just seems like, wow, that was a very intriguing pick.
Yeah, he's impressive.
So, Mark, one thing that this is an IDP show, we care a lot about the defensive side of the ball. So one question that I have, they let Joe Schobert, you talk about workmanlike and just a guy that was an absolute grinder for you all, played like close to 100% of the snaps. They let him walk out the door, go to Jacksonville. So I'm curious now, who's going to play linebacker for this team in 2020?
Yeah, I didn't love that move. I kind of felt like he fit exactly what they're looking for. With not a lot of like clear ideas of what they're going to do going forward. I like Mac Wilson. It's tough to base off a rookie season. They had some issues on defense last year, but I think Mac Wilson is someone that to me feels exactly what they're looking for also. But I think you could look at Cleveland might be a team that could run a lot of nickel and dime sets. I don't think that they're a 4-man front with, especially with Myles Garrett there, and that's what they want to do. But I could see them being like kind of a 4-2-5 scenario a lot. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe just 2 linebackers, but Mac Wilson is the hope for me at that position. I think this like Taki, they've got that guy too. And like, there isn't a clear replacement. I really like Joe Schobert. I thought he was just he wasn't, an all-star, but I thought that he was a playmaker. And if you go back and watch Browns games over the last 2 seasons, he just seemed to be in on a lot of plays that were transformative for them. And so I have the same question you do.
Yeah, and they had the money to pay him as well. That's what's confusing.
I don't know what the assessment was. I think it would be fascinating to find out what they were thinking there. A big chunk of Browns fans, they're always infighting and battling, but I'm on the side of people that thought, keep this guy. Why not?
Yeah, I agree.
And we're all pretty big Kirksey believers too. And gosh, Green Bay's putting a lot of faith in him this year, obviously getting rid of Blake Martinez and everything as well. So hope he can stay healthy for them.
I think they like Kirksey a lot, but I mean, the injury stuff was maybe they just thought, it's not, we've paid him a lot of money. We've not gotten a lot post. It was sort of right after the extension that that Kirksey ran into those issues.
They cut him, didn't they?
Well, they moved on. Yeah. I think he's going to be, to me, he's could be really productive if healthy, but he missed, I don't know what the amount was, but like a full season and then a flock of games the next time around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just interesting though that they decided to cut him or move on from him when they didn't have any veterans really at linebacker.
Right, him and Schobert in the same offseason. So it's like either they have a really clear plan that will become clear to us. I don't, not being there. It is a slight mystery to me.
I hope it's Talkie. I would love to say that name every week. So
Well, I think it's the two of them, him and Mac. I mean, Mac Wilson. So I don't know who else the option is. I mean, they did draft. They drafted a linebacker. I forgot it, but apparently PFF had him as like the most, sort of sure tackler in the league in college football a year ago. But
they brought in BJ Goodson too, I think, from Green Bay.
They did. Yep.
He's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, the Browns. There's a term in fantasy football, Mark, I'm sure you've heard before, of post-hype sleeper. And I feel like that really is the outlook for me for the Browns this year is everyone's excited for the Bengals. Everyone's excited for the Cardinals, the Bills, kind of these new front-running teams. And it's like, don't forget about the Browns. All the reasons that we were excited about them last year are still there with potentially a better coaching staff in place.
Yeah, I think actually, again, to get Jack Conklin and then Wills on the tackle, I mean, they kind of neutralized their biggest issue from a season ago. And it kind of reminds me of 2 off seasons ago when everyone was gushing over the Niners. And then the Niners had issues and injuries and problems and faded. And then a year later, no one's talking about the Niners and they come roaring out. And I'm not saying Cleveland's going to do that. It's just that they have the roster to suggest that whatever we were hopeful about a year ago, it's still in play. It's just that I think just as covering sports, it's so narrative driven that we're tired of that narrative. So we ignore it and we move on to another team to be hyped up about. And it's probably better for the Browns in general to not be talked about that way. I don't like teams that haven't proven anything. To get 6 primetime games and thrown into that position, and it's better to be under the radar.
It is. It takes the pressure off a little bit. And that was a team, especially with Freddie Kitchens at the helm, that felt like probably not great to have the spotlight on them and to be sort of like America's team for the year. That's just a lot of pressure and expectations for a team that just hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was overtly combustible, and it combusted.
It combusted. That's right. So, Mark, we mentioned we're a defensive podcast. We love giving the attention to the other side of the ball. So one thing as we kind of look forward here, now that the draft's over, free agency, there's some skies left out there. But for the most part, we understand what these rosters look like now. So I want to take a turn, each of us, and we'll have you kick us off here as our guest. One defensive player that you are very excited to watch in 2020. Who you got?
Well, I'd probably go Derwin James. I just think that, you missed him up until I think he played 5 games last year at the tail end of the season when, the Chargers were kind of cooked at that point. What a difference maker. And one of the reasons they beat the Ravens in the playoffs the year before and the way they used him so well. And if you want to look to the Chargers as a team that could roar back from that record, assuming that their quarterback situation figures itself out quickly, Derwin James was just like a pretty fascinating game. It's funny. I feel like we get like the safety position doesn't get a lot of attention, but then suddenly these like life-altering players come in at that position and change everything we think. And every decade there's 2 or 3 of them. Certainly one of those guys. So I would look at him and say, if he's if he can come back to what he was as a rookie, the Chargers are a different team.
Yeah, you're speaking Bobby's love language right now. It is Derwin James.
I hope I didn't take your answer.
No,
you didn't.
Okay, good.
He does love him some Derwin, though. I would say, yeah, Derwin James, Jamal Adams, sort of those 2 transcendent, once-in-a-generation type talents.
Buda Baker,
Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah.
Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah, we've got some Cardinals safeties fans here in the podcast tonight, Mark. So yeah, Derwin James, especially with the injury kind of cutting his season short, it'll be so much fun to watch him, and that could be a really fun Chargers team if Justin Herbert or Tyrod Taylor or a combination of the both can keep the offensive side afloat. They've got some really nice defensive pieces, landing Kenneth Murray there to help solidify what's been a bit of a quagmire at the linebacking core. So, I don't know. I mean, who's the better team in LA? We know the Chargers probably aren't going to draw any fans, but I don't know. It'll be fascinating to watch who ends up with the better record this year.
Yeah.
So, Bobby, who do you got for the defensive player you're excited to watch? I think I know who this might be.
Well, I don't think you do, Josh. It's Kenneth Murray, linebacker for the Los Angeles Chargers.
Speak of the devil.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Murray looks like. The last couple of years we've been through the whole Thomas Davis, Kaiser White, Jatavis Brown, just mess of who is actually going to be their, green dot from one week to the next. Thomas Davis actually racked up 112 tackles last year.
Did he really?
Today. So he was decent for them,
Wow.
and he's actually now in Washington, which
Yep.
kind of makes sense with Rivera. But interested to see if Murray can actually solidify that position. We won't know that in 2020. It'll take some time, but it'll be fun to see how Murray and Derwin play together. They've got a great line in Bosa. I'm a big Melvin Ingram fan. But if Murray can just, you look at this guy's past and you look at, this guy's history of, what he's been through in his life and his brothers and sisters that he's basically helped raise. Seems like the guy's like a genuinely good dude. It would be a great person to, be the mic and be the voice for that defense. Because really it seems like that's kind of what they're looking for. So, yeah, Isaiah Simmons is my heart-led answer, but with my brain, I say Kenneth Murray.
I love that.
Yeah, that should be fun. And it is, as IDP fans and, we were watching the draft with anticipation, not just for these wide receivers and running backs to see where they would land for fantasy purposes, but also these defensive guys. And it was a little bit of a groan whenever, Kenneth Murray, possibly the draft's most touted linebacker, lands in like the black hole, the Bermuda Triangle of linebacking cores. So that was a little bit of a bummer. We're hoping Kenneth Murray, as defensive fans, can break the curse of what has been just a really tough to figure out linebacking situation for the Chargers. So, Addy, keep us going here, man. Who are you looking forward to watching?
Okay, for me, it's got to be Chase Young. I don't think I'm telling any lies here when I say that we all think he's going to be the next great defensive end. And as the kids say, he's got next.
Ooh, nice lingo, Addy. Thank you for keeping us hip.
Yeah, no problem there, boys. But adding this guy to a line that already has Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Montez Sweet, Ioannidis, Kerrigan, that's going to be hard to deal with, and I think a lot of people are underestimating this team. If Dwayne Haskins is average, that defense is going to keep them in games. So that's a little sleeper team for me this year, the Redskins. But definitely excited to see Chase Young.
Yeah. I mean, their front seven to me is interesting, and it's easy kind of just to glance at the Redskins and say, oh, they'll be 3-13, and I'm with you. I'm not sure that that's the case under Ron Rivera. They're going to be a little tougher than advertised.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like if we can get even an average kind of middle of the road performance from Dwayne Haskins. We need to see some of those offensive skill guys step up. It'd be great to have a big year or two from Terry McLaurin. Be great to finally see the breakout come there. You've got Adrian Peterson still in the building somehow, still grinding away. We, as fantasy owners, we'd love to see Darius Geis finally get his moment in the sun. But it'll be fascinating. That is definitely. Mark. Do you agree? Do you think Rivera was brought in to kind of steady the ship there in Washington a little bit?
I think so. I thought it was a bit of a coup that they basically got to him first and hired him well before the coaching, hiring cycle kind of got underway. And kind of a good moment for Daniel Snyder, who's not had a lot of them lately, to get Ron Rivera in there. And I think he is a steadying influence. And I kind of tells other teams around the league, because you're moving on from the Bruce Allen and all the other business in the front office too, where Ron Rivera is someone that people want to deal with, other teams. They kind of struggled in free agency. They didn't get some of the guys they wanted to, with Amari Cooper comes to mind and others. But I think he's there for the long haul. I never really trust the Redskins when it comes to truly turning over a new leaf of consistency. But it's about as good of a coaching hire as the Redskins could ever possibly imagine.
Yeah. And another little point there. I really like bringing in Thomas Davis to teach up those young guys. Mm-hmm. So just have an extra coach for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, there's a huge group of players out there that would have no problem playing for Ron Rivera and would enjoy it. And, this whole idea of culture change is, not always as real as it seems, but I think in this case, they need it. Their fan base, which has been through just a horror show, needs something to cling to, and they have it now.
Yeah. I saw Mark, did you get a chance to watch the All or Nothing season with the Panthers? That was
well, I had a chance and I chose not to take the chance, but maybe I don't blame you. Yeah. Well, I did see some stuff about Cam Newton that kind of made me think, I like Cam Newton more than I thought I did.
Yeah, that was the big takeaway for me. Was I always thought Wes's description of Newton that stuck with me as a preening schmo was dead on accurate up until I saw that show. And then I realized what a good leader he is, what a good teammate he is. The guys that play with him absolutely love him. But the other takeaway was that when you talk about adults in the room, I think Ron Rivera has to be at the very top of that list, because the way he was like a steadying influence. There was a great scene, I'm sure you can look it up online, with Devin Funchess, I believe it was. This was before he came over to the Colts. And he had gotten into fisticuffs in practice, and come to find out, it was because I believe he was dealing with the death of his brother. And so there was this great moment where Rivera and Funchess are sitting on the sidelines, and they're just having this moment between two men, not coach and player, but hey, let me talk to you man to man, what's going on. And I don't think that every head coach is wanting to put themselves in that situation and have those kind of conversations with players.
Yeah, it reminds me of Bruce Arians. Reminds me of guys like that, in Ron Rivera, you don't have to be a former player at all. I mean, they're some of the best coaches ever were not former players, but it doesn't hurt with guys in general to run the room and say, by the way, I was on the 85 Bears, or I have been where you've been, and I understand the pressures you're going through as a man, married, trying to deal with probably some of the temptations that come your way, the family needs, the hangers on, the friends that you were friends with in high school that now have endless favors needed of you. I mean, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, Bobby, you know all about that, right? The podcast groupies have been coming out and
I think Bobby's been dealing with that for months, and we
look at that suit. I mean, how can he not?
Right.
He's having to keep him away with a stick.
Big part of that.
I'll wrap us up here. One guy that I am so excited for that really flashed in his rookie season was Devin White, linebacker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I just paid a king's ransom for him in our main fantasy league. So this is a big part of the answer. I really want to see that investment pay off. But at the same time, with all of the excitement now around the Bucs and Gronk and Tom Brady coming to town, this is just a team that has a lot of buzz. And I'm really excited because I think we have all these names up in lights, you know, the Mike Evans, the Chris Godwins, the Tom Bradys, and the Gronkowskis. And I'm really excited with all these primetime games for Devin White to get some love and for him to take that leap into the upper echelon of linebackers in the NFL. I think we saw it a little bit there. Having Levante David still in the building, I think is actually a benefit. Mark, and you talked about having Thomas Davis in Washington. I think it's the same thing with Devin White, where you like having that guy alongside you when you're playing linebacker to help shore up kind of that middle of the defense. But I think you're going to see Devin White's talent kind of rise and even surpass Levante David, who's been a great linebacker for a long time, very underrated. But I'm just so excited for the rest of, you know, the people outside this weird little IDP community that we love so much to start to learn who Devin White is.
Yeah, I'm not in that community, but I respect the community. Best wishes to you. But
it's a weird community. You got the beard for it, Mark, for sure.
I mean, they're going to get a lot of primetime games, and like, when these things go wrong, these build a team scenarios, when they go wrong, it's because, oh, we forgot that the defense matters, or, you know, things like, it's like their defense looks pretty solid. And Devin White could wind up being a huge household name if they go the distance the way that people think they will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be the hope. Should be a lot of fun. So let's end, Mark. One of my favorite things from the Around the NFL podcast is anytime there's a Qualis tu Fantasia, anytime there is some sort of sandwich prop and you're throwing out these crazy ideas, seeing if anyone will bite, you almost always take it to some sort of apocalyptic scenario where there's like a terroristic event wiping out half the season, or aliens have come down and abducted someone, or there's a female assassin firing,
or a pandemic, threatening
yeah.
the season, which I feel like I nailed about a year ago. But
you did. You're still owed sandwiches for that one, and the Philly special, by the way.
Thank you.
And so we want to get you out of here on this, and we'll save yours for last because I know I want you to kind of close us out here with a bang. So Adam, we'll start with you. One bold prediction for the 2020 season. Hit us with it.
The Arizona Cardinals are going to advance to the second round of the playoffs.
All right. That's spicy.
Love it.
I like it.
Yeah, I don't know. Has the team had a better offseason than the Cardinals? You know, you get rid of David Johnson and that terrible contract. You tag Keenan Drake. You bring in Josh Jones, Eno Benjamin. On defense, they bring in future superstar Isaiah Simmons, Devondre Campbell, Jordan Phillips. Boys, it's all lining up. This is going to be a team that's going to be really good next year.
I love it.
Yeah, you do have Kyler Murray. Again, a great Wessling comparison, or maybe it was a Dan comparison. Marvin the Martian, just the helmet with the little legs sticking out, running around out there. I do worry that he's like 5'7", but it seems like promising results in year one. So we'll see how it goes. Huh?
He's a baller.
He is a baller. I do like Kyler a lot. I think the visor looks sick. He's definitely got some drip going at him for sure. So, Bobby, hit us with your bold prediction, man. What are you thinking?
So Mark actually alluded to it earlier, but I believe that with the additions of Jedrick Wills, with Jack Conklin, I think that the 2020 rushing title goes to Nick Chubb this year. I think a stat line of 320 carries, 1,650 yards and 12 touchdowns isn't really out of the realm of possibility for him. You know, last year, so not only in 2018, but in 2019, he had 11 carries of over 20 yards. And then also in 2018 and 2019, he had 4 carries of over 40 yards. So, you know, you take a Jack Conklin who just led Derrick Henry to his, 2019 rushing title, put not only him but also Jedrick Wills on the offensive line for the Cleveland Browns. And I think that Nick Chubb is a better running back than Derrick Henry. Not as big and manly and sexy, but, I mean, he's getting the job done, So, 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, I think is a great season for him. Could we see 2,000 yards or 3,000 yards?
Wow. You're making me excited. I mean, like the Kareem Hunt factor is a factor, but I think Nick Chubb somehow is a little bit under the radar. I when I watch him and like it's just me. It's just my human eyes. Faulty, but I see little elements of Jim Brown, and I've said that before. And I just think that he is the perfect. He is the heart and soul of that offense. So I really appreciate what you said there. And like the only thing is that when Kareem Hunt came into that offense too, he changed that offense. He was electric. So I wonder how the workload. You guys are the fantasy guys, but I don't know how the workload would stack up. But Nick Chubb to me is one of the more watchable players I've seen in a long time.
Well, and, Adam can probably talk to it with Stefanski and everything, but, look at Dalvin Cook last year and how much they decided to run the ball.
Yep.
And, Kareem actually ran out of the slot a lot. So he wasn't always, back there, in the backfield. So, yeah, that is something to take into consideration, but I think you're spot on in that, Nick Chubb looks like, in Adam's terms, he got next.
Yes.
It's true. It is true. Addy, just thank you for blessing us with that terminology.
You're welcome.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
So there is every year.
Josh, this is terrible. I'm just now seeing this one in the doc, but go ahead and continue.
I had a different one in there, but I was like, I don't really believe this. I'm going to go to something that I could actually see happening. So every year there is a team that goes from worst to first. Now, I think there's a lot of people excited for what the Bengals did. And you could say, oh, they would be an interesting candidate, but they've got to get through the Ravens, the Browns, and the Steelers to get to first in that division. That's a daunting task. So I'm going to go with a bit of a out of left field pick here and say that the Miami Dolphins win the AFC East. What if the leading jersey seller, Tua Tagovailoa, is the answer? What if he is the next Drew Brees, a left-handed Drew Brees? And this team, which is not that void of offensive talent. I mean, the line, okay, you could maybe make some quibbles there, but you've got Devontae Parker, you've got Preston Williams, you've got they just brought in one of our favorites, Matt Getcha Burrito, down there to spell the other running backs that they have. Jordan Howard, new addition. So I just think that this is a team that is maybe being slept on. They smacked my Colts around at the end of last season, kind of late in the year. It was a lot of fun to watch. So whether it's Fitzpatrick or whether it's Tua, you basically have the Patriots, total question mark. You have the Jets, again, total question mark. And then you have the Bills, who I think we all expect to be good. But I don't think anyone would be shocked if the Bills came crashing back down to earth as one of these other teams came surging forward. So that is my bold, spicy prediction. The Dolphins, your 2020 AFC East champions.
I love it. I think Brian Flores, too good to tank. This organic tank scenario, like
he was tank proof.
Yeah, it didn't quite fly. And like, they've added a lot of talent. I mean, their secondary is insane right now. And like, we'll see. I kind of love them too in this situation. And, adding that 7th playoff spot doesn't hurt either.
Helps.
They were a bit of a problem down the stretch. So they're a little spicy.
They are for sure. All right, Mark, take us home. Bold prediction for 2020. What you got?
All right. Well, so it's not a player deep dive. I think that we're going to deal with a season that's different. In my hope, we all hope that you get 16 games from all these teams, but they've already talked about the concept of there's no fans in the stands, that there will be noise on television from fans, that they will what the Falcons got clipped for a couple years ago of fake crowd noise. I think that by week 5, 6, 7 that. And this is not a very deep dive player scenario, but I think that fake crowd noise will become the biggest talking point on Twitter if the season starts on time, by mid-October. The reaction will be all over the map, extremely volatile, and maybe the NFL will have to adjust what they're doing because of it. I'm not sure I'm supposed to be saying that. I just think that the idea of it, and it's maybe more the networks that are going to be doing it than the NFL itself, but that fake crowd noise will seem very strange, a bit alien, a bit off the mark, and to others maybe welcoming. I don't know, but it will be a massive thundering storyline.
Have you seen over in China how like they're putting dummies and stuff in the stands?
Well, they talked about fake fans in the NFL too. I think you take that camera and you zoom in a little. We don't need to see the fake
field.
The fake fans.
So. We're fine. We're okay without the fans. Just play the game.
We get it. I think we kind of all get what we're going through. So.
Yeah, like unless it's the XFL and we have the beer snake coming down from like one stadium deck to the other, we don't need to see the fans. It's okay.
We're good. So
we don't need.
How much more interesting of a year would it be too to actually like have the silence and hear what the players are saying?
Yes.
Hear play calls, hear them talking trash. I mean,
absolutely.
Like, it's going to have to be on like maybe a 30-second delay. But I mean, for the most part, it could be family-ish,
like that. Those parabolic mics are like, it's their time to step up and really shine here.
That's right. I mean, we saw it with the XFL, not to go back to that defunct league once again, but they had coaches mic'd up. They had players mic'd up. I mean, you could hear what was going on. They were interviewing players right as they came off the field. So I think the NFL, if they're smart, they're kind of looking at this and saying, okay, what can we replicate? We stole the Skycam last time XFL had its debut. So let's take some elements this time and borrow, especially if we're not going to have, crowd noise. I've said for years, if they were to throw an NFL package on Showtime or HBO or one of these adult networks that, and pay $100 a year, I'd love to hear all the sideline stuff, man. That would be way more fascinating than anything a commentator has to say.
I'm with you. I think it's a chance to do things a little differently in a year that if games are played, we'll never forget it. I mean, last year was the 100th year of the NFL, which is a major landmark, but the 101st can be the weirdest, most memorable campaign of all time if they do it right.
Yeah, the next 100 years, no fans.
We're done with the human element here.
Cardboard cutouts. We'll do the Home Alone thing where we're making a move and dance in the stands. It'll be great.
Love it.
Well, Mark, I appreciate you bringing it to a different angle because you can absolutely see, Skip Bayless on, First Take or whatever that show is, like debating this with Shannon Sharp, like skip, like I can just hear it now. And you're right. This is going to be everything that we're talking about because that's just how the NFL news cycle goes. By week 6 or 7, like you said, we're going to be trying to find different things to talk about here.
Well, and if they were generous hosts, they'd bring the 4 of us on to. We brought this up months before, but I have a feeling like they probably will not be doing that.
Just like you didn't get your sandwiches, you will not get the credit you deserve here.
Nothing changes
for this bold prediction. It's ridiculous. All right, Mike, well, we'll get you out of here, man. We know you got a house full of kiddos, and we seriously appreciate you coming on the pod. Like Adam said, have no idea why you agreed to come on the show, but we are grateful nonetheless. This has been a lot of fun. So for anyone who maybe is hearing you for the first time, give us all of the details here. How can they keep up with your work?
You could find me on Twitter at Marc Sessler, MARC SESSLER. Same on Instagram. Our podcast is 3 times a week, twice audio, and we have a Friday NFL Network show. And if you kind of go to our Twitter accounts, you'll find all that stuff there. And I would just say I loved your guys' show, and it was really super fun to talk with you guys. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, definitely go check out the show. You guys, this is Thursday, so you guys have a show coming up tomorrow. Definitely check it out. It's different than the podcast. It's a lot of fun. I'm glad they gave you guys an hour time block. For now, yeah. Like you said, will you be just kind of like off-season filler and maybe get the chopping block here once the season starts? I hope not, because there is a subset of fans that's looking for content like what you guys provide. We don't always want the studio set up with the shirt and tie and the former players. That just doesn't reach everyone.
We're going to put a lot of listeners y'all's way, Mark. Just prepare the network tomorrow.
I was going to say.
Thank you. Well, get those ratings, spike those ratings. And
that's right.
That will only help. So
get those servers ready because there's going to be a surge of activity coming y'all's way for sure. So, so check out Mark's work, NFL.com/Sessler. He's on Twitter at Marc Sessler, and go to ATN Shirts. Mark, I believe you're wearing one of the shirts that we have from the Bunker Cast. That's right. Wow. A city filled with heroes in bunkers. So go check it out if you'd like to get one. ATNshirts.com. Mark, thanks again. We'll do this again soon, man. This has been a lot of fun. We really appreciate you coming on.
Let's do it tomorrow.
Let's do it. Let's run it back. Why not? We don't have anything going on.
Let's change our name. Big Four. Let's do
Big
it.
Four.
Do it.
It's
Let's
done.
do it.
Mark's in. I love it.
I love it.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening. We appreciate you all hanging with us, and hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to give us a like on Twitter. Check out the podcast over at Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Mark, take care. We'll check you out tomorrow on NFL Network, man.
Same to you guys. What a pleasure to hang with you, and hope to see you soon.
Sounds good. Y'all take care. We'll see y'all next week.